I understand leadership. 101% there's there's a possibility that they do not fully understand leadership. And that's why I'm saying we'll walk the journey together. So I'm also hoping to learn from all of you. The goal here is I'm trying to get my screens in check. Yeah. The goal here is to ensure we pick the learning. And as we pick the learning, one of the things I will start with is just a quick check-in. That's who I am. I will not delve into it because I feel Sheila has, and also because of time, I want us to jump into the first thing that I want us all, because we're not so many, out of 28 people, if 14 or 7 people can respond to this, it will be really great. So what word will you use determines on the space you're in. So again, feel confident and comfortable to use the word. In one word, how would you describe the kind of leader you want to be in? Don't think about the current leaders we have. Think about yourself as a leader and then just lay it out. Okay. Um, and as you do, make use of the chat box. Remember, it's you, it's not them. And therefore it doesn't matter. And I'll give you very interesting examples, and I would want you to stick to what you said after we review some of the examples I'll walk you with. Now, how many chats? I can only see two. I'm being encouraged that the rest are typing very hard, and that's why they're not coming. And network is the issue. But the first quote I would want us to start with is leadership is not about advancing yourself. It's about advancing others. Okay? Even as you add in the different kind of leaders you want to be, you almost want to figure out what's the impact? How is the impact to the person that you are leading? Because remember, you start leading by self and then you go building up. Now, going back to the topic at hand, one of the things we tackled last time was really breaking down small pieces in the different environments we're in, looking at a value system, how it works, are you measuring it, and certain essence where we kept saying that if you're not measuring, it's not important. And certain times we assume that the leaders are the ones who want or need to lead this discussion, but you will discover slowly by slowly that you as an individual, you have a bigger part to play, and your leader only guides. The doers are us. And that's why I'm saying we're going to learn all of us together. So, redefining leadership for a human-centered workplace. One of the things I know that comes into our mind as we're thinking about this is it's going to be the perfect environment. But you'll discover that the environment is pieced in different pieces. And if one piece doesn't work, then it just keeps distorting in all these other environments. And it can be in the department that you're in that it's not working, or it can be in your department that you're in that is only working, and everybody else is feeling a very different effect. So I'd want us to start with what do we mean to redefine leadership today? Now, we have had great leaders who are out there. I've listened to Gladwell, yeah, Gladwell, the one for 10,000 hours. One of the things I came to discover is you will need to put more than the 10,000 hours. And even when you're thinking about what it means to redefine leadership today, you need to think about the kind of leader you want to be, just as you have stated. But as you think about it, leadership is no longer about positions. So even when you're thinking about being a participative kind of leader, involving leader, inclusive leader, it's all about how you make people feel and perform. And you want to almost take a pause and say, okay, if I am a reliable leader, if I am an achiever, if I'm an intentional leader, transformative leader, what's the mirroring effect that is coming out to the teams? And I know sometimes we would say, oh, no, I am leading well. And if they are not performing, then it means it's them. and not me because I've impacted and rebuilt them. You almost want to remember that leadership is a combination of different things. And I'd want us to focus for a minute on how leadership tries to balance humanity and performance. And I'll give you an example of something I have seen in the past that really called for the leader who was leading the organization to make drastic decisions. I know we have experienced what happened during COVID, but this was just before COVID. This was at a time where you almost first, I would say we were analog because we were yet fully digital. But one of the things the leader was tasked on was during one of his travels, he had a leadership training, just technical leadership training, more specific on what he was centered on, and that was on accounting. But at the tail end, one of the asks from one of the representatives to the organization he was in was there were two suitcases, a very well-structured suitcase. It had alcohol, it had all these things, and a pretty good amount. And then that one was just a basic suitcase with a notebook. You know, those ones we get all in all those trainings. And when you're thinking about, and this is back in the day, so there's no evidence, there's no tracking, like not who will even know the kind of person you are out there while you're doing all these things. And he made the decision as he was giving us the story. He made the decision that he would not opt for the money because it wasn't again very clear. You know, it can be a gift, but what's the intentionality of it? Um, and he remembered that the opportunity that he had been given was an opportunity that had been given to any junior staff. And they would have maybe been caught with a decision like that, where you have to make, where your principals would have to put in place. No one would know. You'd almost escape with it. And he made the choice of taking things. He said was, there's a lot of learning, but also there's this that I've brought in. And somebody asked, oh, there was nothing else more worthy that you'd have taken. And at that point, a lot of questions raised in his mind. And it was like, would I have kept my principal or would I have shown up here? And later on, again, a situation arose on him. He had to assess that team. And one of the team member had just lost their father, had not done very well. And he had a choice of affirming in his principle that this is the right thing to do or listening to every other noise that was happening. And more specifically from this staff, because this staff, not only did he undermine him during the ask on, is there any worthy thing, but it was in front of other staff. And essentially why? Because everybody knew when someone travels there, they'll bring alcohol, they'll bring this, they'll bring all sorts of things, you know? And during that performance review, he had a choice of, oh, it's payback. I can slash you in 1 minute. And I'd want us to just delve in that humanity shows up differently. It doesn't show up immediately. It will show up in different folds. And why this during a very not so digital moment, um, one of the interesting things is because, let me see. Yeah, one of the interesting things is that gentleman was my father. Okay. Now he gave us that story. Well, probably maybe I was like at 12. That's why I could understand it and everything. But it still didn't make sense because the version of what you're given at 12 wouldn't reflect as now as I am. And you don't understand the impact, you don't understand how it goes building up over time to other people because you think that it's not a necessity to talk to young people who are not yet thinking about their career or leadership path, and you're thinking you are talking to just, an everyday person. So the impact on humanity translates very differently. That impact was not only to that stuff, it was more to me as an individual. And it was more about reflections of everyday interactions with different people. How do I show up? You know, am I grateful of the kind of person who is in front of me? And am I equally honoring that person? So when you're thinking about values, those three values I've put in, which is some of the things we had covered last time, are things that nobody will come and tell you directly, but a company will put them in their website, and how you come out matters most. So people will no longer follow titles. People will follow certain values that reflect on these leaders. And when they do, it mirrors more on the impact that will reflect on them. Again, trust is always the hardest because it takes time. But remember, workplaces demand empathy, they demand adaptability, they demand authenticity. And best leaders inspire, they don't instruct. So when you're thinking about authenticity, there's been a lot of conversation now about authenticity, but why? Because there's something else hooking that to happen at work. And those are things like wellness, mental health, and all those things. Why? Because they are good processes, but actually they are more of a compliance measure to the kind of leaders that you have. Now, just swinging back to our topic, and I'd want us to first pause here a little bit because remember, we've talked about the values, we've talked about the kind of impact that you have, but how do you get there? And what are the, I would say, different skill sets, ways of learning that you would need to have to enable you to be able to have certain values, especially when you're thinking about empathy, and even sometimes inspirational. When you're thinking about emotional intelligence, one of the biggest challenge that I've seen most leaders come across is that EI is sometimes just trained. And then somebody just says, I'm emotionally intelligent. Guys, I'm okay now. Now I'm self-aware. Now I'm all those things. But most of the time, as leaders evolve into different levels, EI becomes very important to come back to it in terms of learning because that self-awareness is the hardest. And I've seen it to the point that unless you're in that position, you will not understand what self-awareness is. Okay. And therefore, how you mirror yourself to other people becomes important. And I'd like to take a pause here and just ask, because I would want us to have a few minutes of interaction. Has any one of us had an opportunity to be involved in what is called a 360 assessment? And if you have, you can, they're called what? You can use the emojis to communicate or chat. And why I'm saying that is because I would want us to take a pause there because when you're thinking about 360, sometimes it can almost look and feel like, oh, what do you mean 360? It just means my team needs to communicate about me. That one they have already told me verbally. No. A 360 assessment that covers a whole aspect of who you are. You assess yourself, your supervisor assesses yourself, other people assess, also get assessed. And then what comes out of it is what is called a personal development plan. Now, I have seen Iba has done. I'm also assuming Ruth is aware of it. And why am I asking about 360? Because until you go through a 360, that EI you're claiming you confidently, hook on and can carry it properly, that self-awareness is not in check. I love the fact that also Rebecca has been part of it. Remember, self-awareness will call you out so badly because 360 has confidentiality. So it means I get to tell you things without looking at you in the face, but I get to tell you the truth because I'm saying this is what you need to work on. And if you work on this, one, two, three things is going to reflect in your workplace. And then it's echoed around maybe X number of people who are in that organization. Now, this exercise cannot be done by you voluntarily saying, I would want to do a 360 on myself. No. If you were to do it, there are other tools that you're able to use. But one of the biggest challenges about 360, sometimes it's not on the employees who are also participating. It's actually to the leaders when you're thinking about it, when you're thinking about redefining leadership. It starts from there. You know, those are practical tools that you can take a pause on and say, can we implement this? You being the leader, not you being the junior that you are very excited to, tell off your boss. And then think about self-control. You have to put yourself in that situation in order for you to assess yourself if you have it. And more often, people say, me, I have self-control, by the way. But how many of us use clocks in the morning? Hmm? How many of us use timers to lock us out from certain gadgets? You know, self-control starts from me and then it gets cascaded in different hats. And why am I talking about the most basic spaces? Because those most basic spaces are the ones you're in control of. You may not be in control of your 100 staff that you're managing, but you're in control of you. And if you can't lead yourself well, then there's a disconnect. When it comes to empathy, again, until you find yourself in a situation that reflects that, one of the disconnects would be somebody will say, I'm a very empathetic leader. And then you're challenged and asked a certain question. Then you say, no, but the policy says this. And then you're asked, even if the policy says this, do you have the power and liberty to override it or request for an approval, having those difficult conversations. I don't want to dive off topic, but one of the things that is very dicey in agreeing if it should and how it should be is when a lady loses a child, whether it is in full term or mid-term. Any person who shows up and tells you, no, that one, you just give. It's, I mean, kwani, what's the emotion here? Kwani you don't know. You should give full maternity leave. Let me tell you, not until you sit in that position, in making that position, will you know how it is. And then another pose question. If you're giving full maternity or giving X number of days or weeks, are you doing the same to the men? And I remember I've ever been challenged on that. And it wasn't because this had happened and then somebody said, I want this because this has happened. It was genuine. But had I sat down and thought about, before COVID, so most of my experiences before COVID, because after COVID, people now started reflecting more and showing up better in terms of empathy. But I was challenged. And one of the things is, how do you justify that? And most of the time, again, as long as you're not in the position, what do you say? It is very doable. I mean, Dorcas, what do you mean? So you just go and say this happened. Eh? No, no, no. Reiterate. Say no. Remember, we have just started from self-aware in terms of self-control, and that is a reflection of you. You have to remember there's another party you're dealing with who may not have all those things, and therefore how you show up would matter most on how they receive it. Because if you cannot sell it as their ideation in terms of this is such a great thing you're proposing, that proposal will be in your draft until you have the courage. Okay? And then relationship building. A lot of people disconnect what relationship building is at work and they think it's the kind of way you show up to work and I greet people and I know people and they know me and we go for lunch. That would be in your social setting. But relationship building means I know Lucy Waymo, I know Sheila, and I can call them out when something is wrong, and they will know I'm calling them out because I want them to grow. Okay? Remember, you have to almost be aware of yourself because if you're not, then someone else is going to be fishing. They're going to be collecting. Fishing and collecting is very simple. It is the kind of feedback you get from your teams that claim you're very aggressive because there's no relationship. Okay? So it's one of those things that you go and you almost want to understand how did we find ourselves into a point that somebody's saying, I'm not approachable. Maybe you're not because we have not invested in certain things. So I want us to get into building trust, and I will do a simple exercise here. And I wish it was in person because I would have done the normal one of, Lucy trusts Sheila, and I tell Lucy, fall back. And I say the opposite so that I see if Sheila can cascade from one corner to another. But the goal here is when you're thinking about building trust, as I said, the situation recreates itself for you to be able to demonstrate to others that they can entrust you, not only in information, but with the ability to help them make judgment over certain things that are very, very important. Okay. And the goal here is to say that people perform best in environments where they feel safe. There has to be a consistency flow in that. There has to be transparency on how we talk about it. And I know we have not reached 100% on transparency at workplaces because until the day we're able to publish our performance for our companies and payroll mirroring each other, we are far from it. And we may not get there because, again, that's where quote unquote data protection is more critical than the other. But then, what is transparency? Okay, in US, they have a rule. You cannot post an ad. You can't actually hire if you have not declared how much you're paying me. So everyone will know how much I'm being paid, generally, if they were aware of the post. But what we're saying it's legally binding that I will not apply for a role until you indicate how much. And you cannot ask me for my previous payslip because of there's no correlation. This is what is transactional and we're showing up. So when you're thinking about how are you going to deliver on promises, what have you thought about? What have you proposed to your team? And what have you failed? And I'll tell you that one I have learned by failing, you know, the rush in somebody coming to your desk and saying, Dorcas, I need XYZ. It's very urgent. They give you a timeline. You do your mental maths without looking at your calendar and consulting other people, and you say, oh yeah, this is doable. And you get stuck because you realize immediately you said doable, immediately your calendar opens and you realize there is no way in high roadness that this is going to happen. So again, how you show up matters because the building of trust is in the little things, it's not in the big things. As you get to our exercise, I want us also to think about caring about individuals. Now, it's not caring, quote unquote, of you're sick and everything, but how you show up, how considerate are you at the workplace, and what kind of environment have you created? It can also be seen falsely when we are following up because this is our workers. I'm assuming maybe a few people are here in HR. I keep calling Jerry, and I'm just telling Jerry, I want to know if you've arrived in the office, but for me, I'm just following my KPI. And Jerry assumes, at least HR called me. I'm so happy and content that HR was checking on me, but deep down, HR was not checking on you. HR was doing work. Okay. Then I want us to now take 2 minutes. We do the exercise. It's just going to be on chat. It's very simple. Um, so the exercise is name two behaviors that build trust and two that break. And it can be some that you have experienced. Um, Let me just put it on the chat. I'll just make it big enough where you can't miss it. And I'd want us to use the chat because we would want to learn from each other. Nimeweka color blue highlight. Hatutaikosa sasa. Yeah, so name two behaviors that build trust and two that break. When you're thinking about trust build at work, again, Don't start with your leader, start with yourself. What have you failed in doing, and how would it work? If it's easy to start with the to that break, then once you get the to that break, automatically it will be easy to know the to that build. So when you're thinking about that, take your time. If I see like two, three responses, that would be amazing. We'll be able to move forward. But I would want us to take a pause there because these are things that happen. And I'm doing my best to be very realistic because the failure too, then I am selling you a habit that will never exist in your life. And also one of the things I've learned is in our work environment, as I say, it's almost half of your life or a big portion of your life. So you almost want to ask yourself, how do I show up, or how is it going to be of benefit to me in terms of rebuilding? So I can see two comments. One from Ruth Serim. It says, trust builders, truth telling, and keeping promises. And then trust breakers, lies and breaking promises. Now you can see how basic it is, and you can almost definitely, we are 35. Even if we were to take the highest percentage would be 90, that we have found ourselves in that space in very different circumstances. And sometimes we almost want to justify. Diana says, build reliability and collaboration. I love that. And then break inconsistency and disconnectedness. When you're thinking about um, collaboration, sometimes, and I don't want to get you into it because I feel collaboration can be a whole topic by itself, but you're thinking about how are you handling remember we talked about relationship building between interdepartments. Are you working in silos? And sometimes you may not almost make sense if you are, but if people keep coming to your desk to ask you for things, and things, quote unquote, are this is information you'd require to share to the team, but people have to come and reiterate you have not shared. It's something you might need to check up on yourself. Lucy talks about consistency and trust. I like that. Rumors and jealousy, consistency and transparency, and reliability and lack of integrity. Yeah, Shemi, lack of integrity. That's a big one. Now, all these things show up in different ways. All these things, you have to experience them to know, then this is how you build the trust. And also you have to experience the break sometimes to even evaluate yourself on how do you show up in different spaces. One of my learnings I have learned most recently in one of the books I was reading, the let them theory, is there's what is in control of your hands. But even with that, what is in control of your hands, there's what you can do that can create a ripple reactive reaction. And you almost want to ask yourself then, how do I get out of it if somebody keeps saying it is me who is the issue? So it's just the self-awareness becomes even more important because that's how you'd come back and say, this is how we're arriving in building trust. I like one that says that breaks timelines, promises not kept, unhealthy competition. So there's competition, but then unhealthy competition. And then there's discipline and consistency, not keeping promises. I'll stop at that because I would want us to move to the next. And one of the things you'll notice is as I said, as you move up the ladder, and sometimes it's not like up the ladder, I am the HOD, it's up the ladder. I am from a point of I didn't have anyone who was reporting to me, and I have even one or two people who is reporting to me, or I am in between departments as an assistant in between a department, and there's a lot of moving parts for your position to work. When you think about HR, you are collaborating, you're expected to collaborate with a lot of people in the sense these are the HODs, but then everybody else expects you to, show up for them. So all these things can almost mirror very well in such a role as HR, but also in such a role as finance, in such a role like marketing. There's a lot of assumed expectation. Even when it's not that clear, there's a lot of assumed expectation. So moving to communication and trying to connect from emotional intelligence, then building trust, then communication. I've done my best to try and simplify this, but there is a tool I would want to share here because, as we are saying, communication just needs to be clear, honest, and compassionate. Now, going back to all that breaks, you'll discover if you get it right in communication, or you start from communication, combining it with emotional intelligence, then building trust can be a way easier because there's clarity, there's honesty as you're doing it, and then compassionate. I think honesty sometimes shows up in different ways. So today I left our premises, I needed to go back to the office, and I was juggling a lot of things. And I'm just trying to type this message, which is a very simple message, like I am unable to pass by the office. But you also want to be so compassionate and say, oh gosh, I really wanted to. And I was just like, can I just say the words as they are? Because the more I hold on to it, it's not going to help. And it's because I expected to leave early where I was. And why am I giving this example? Sometimes you don't know how your communication appears. You think it hasn't affected anyone because you're the one communicating. And therefore I mean, they don't know the detailing of whatever has happened. So I can almost recreate what I want. Okay, so human-centered communication would be ways on how you appear in different spaces, but it's you making the decision on your own. Okay, you can decide you will listen to people or not listen to people. Um, I'll tell you for sure, and I think it's just a bad habit. I keep notebooks of places I've worked because I have learnings I've listened to people, and I'm like, these are experiences that form me and make me a better person now because I was very present in this meeting. So when you're thinking about your listening capability, when you're thinking about how am I going to respond to someone, you almost want to figure out, are you present in that space? And then as you're giving feedback, compassionate, how are you giving that feedback? Are you are you really showing empathy or you're showing sympathy? And then remember, one of the things I've learned in communication is focus on the situation and the behavior, and then act in terms of either you're responding. Because if I focus on you collectively, there's a high probability of a disconnect. And as I mentioned, I would like to just share with you a simple tool model that can guide you while you're doing this. Why is that important, and how is it going to apply to you? Because I know even as you share all these things, not everything would be immediately applicable, but you almost want to ask yourself, today, how have I shown up in all this communication? So there's a CARE model, and CARE is just an acronym, and I'll put it on the chat for guide after I read it, just for you to figure out, oh, maybe I've used this in different ways, or I call it as something different, but it's something that is very applicable. So the CARE model is clarify the issue. Remember the part I talked about the situation? You almost want to show Dorcas that you're listening to her by almost repeating what I've said to affirm me that I'm being listened to. One of the greatest gifts you can give anyone is listening to them. Pick it up from any child. I have a 5-year-old, and if I just allow her to just talk, and for us, the rule is I have to look at you when you're talking to me. Day made. Same experience, adult settings still works. Then A is acknowledge the person. As I said, repeat. Ensure that you're not acknowledging it in the wrong way, but you're acknowledging it in the right way. Then respond with guidance. Why were you doing the clarifying of the issue? In order for you to respond with guidance very easily. And then empower with the next steps. You don't want to be the holder of the solution. Most of the time we enjoy using that. Let me share. that phase of, yeah, nilimsaidia, and then somebody comes and praise you. Ay, Aki, if it was not for you, I would not be here. I'll tell you 101%. For you to know you've helped this person, you have to empower them. And even when you think you're giving it all, you're not. If I'm able to share today the information and for someone else to go and impact another team and train them, I've achieved what I wanted because I've created, for lack of a better word, more soldiers in talking about this model that will have more impact to people I will never reach whatsoever. Even if I tried, I would not reach because they're not in my network, they're not in my space, then there's so many complexities. And therefore, teaching becomes a plus one for you in terms of empowerment. So I've shared the care model. And when you're thinking about the care model, think about it and apply it in all different ways. Think about it and apply it in your next social event when you're there. I think, like for us, HR professionals, there's a dinner that is happening tomorrow. So if you're showing up for the dinner, just apply this and you'll make somebody night amazing. They'll be like, I somebody listened to me, So as you model that and you get your communication right and you structure it and you pick a tool that works for you, then you can, and then only is when you can empower teams. And empowering teams is very, very simple. You always, always focus on what they're good at, and then now build an environment that allows them to lead. Autonomy is there, it's basically very easy to say, but very hard to apply. I remember my first assistant and I had to, let go of things, which was very hard. Learning that I can entrust this person to do things. I mean, first, that's why they were hired, but entrusting them to do it, even if they're going to do it differently. And then recognizing the little wins that come in. Um, in the day we live in a day where we are very reactive. How you react would matter most to that individual unknowingly. And therefore, if you are able to create an environment of coaching, delegation, encouraging new ideas, very important. Now, empowering teams can also do a flip side. And I want to take a pause and just share with you a very brief project that was being done by Google. You can Google it and find out more. Google had a project where the overall said, we don't need a supervisor here. First, you guys, all these sijui Gmail and search, we're the ones who do it. We're the ones who are creating money. Of course, we know what to do. I mean, we love what you're doing. We're so great. And that's why you put us in. And they said, we don't need a manager. We can show up to work. We can do all these things we do, and we will be fine. But then, of course, things were not moving. There was inconsistency of delivery of work. And therefore, in order for them to get a buy-in from the team, they created a project that would relate to the environment they're in. Why? Because they needed them to have ownership. And the project is called Project Oxygen. And I won't delve into it because it's a whole research that has also been done by Harvard, and I would highly encourage you to use it in your workplace because it's a very amazing project that you can clearly define when you're thinking about empowering teams. They were able to define 9 areas that any manager should have if they were to join and lead a team. And they said, if you have tick, 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 tick. And one of them was coaching. One of them was recognition. One of them was delegation. One of them was autonomy. One of them was encouraging new ideas, creating a fostering environment where you'd think through. So 9, go figure out the rest because if there was a project that got it right in understanding why you need this leader to be here or a manager to be there, it's that project. And why? Because they were trying to define what would work in that environment. Now, maybe the same project being applied in your environment may not really work. Okay. And also another question somebody might pose and say is, how come they challenged management and management agreed for them not to have a leader? Because they were delivering. They were great performers. For you to be a great leader, if you think through, is most of the time people are selected based on being the greatest contributor of their team, and sometimes they don't become the greatest leader, because just because you're a great contributor, it doesn't mean you would be able to create the right environment for your team to follow and learn from you. So Google managed to do that. And for me, my learning there was anyone who feels their manager is not doing the right thing, it's because you're not aligned on the priorities, not because um, there's all these things that are building up. No, it's because you've not aligned in your priorities. And the minute you align in your priorities, it becomes very, very clear. So I would want us to take a pause because I'm coming to my end. But these are breakdown, and I'll share a simplified version on the chart of habits you can apply as an action plan. Was how can I show up as a leader, but in a very simplified manner that doesn't shout fast, because sometimes we enjoy the fame, you know. But the question here was, what habits would I be able to apply that um, can transform who I am and transform my team? And I'd like to pose back the question, because remember we had said, I asked you guys what kind of um, leader are you? And people talked about transformative and all. So when you're thinking about daily leadership intention, is think about how you responded to that question and research more into being a transformative, intentional, achiever, reliable leader. What does it take? And what's the dark side of it? Okay, because there's also the dark side that we may not be able to see. Take a daily leadership pause before reacting. And I think I can get it. I'll share a link that was shared to me in regards to being a leader. And it was just, I think I listened to it 5 times. And interesting that we're talking about this topic, Sheila, because it related very well. When people get time, they can look at it as I close. It is, as leaders, we like saying we are so busy, and we are busy, and we think busy is being good. And that will sort of guide you as to how that section I'm talking about, taking a pause and reflecting before reacting, would be really important. And the author, because he's an author, writes more about that. Then there is the weekly check-in with your team or with yourself. How do you do it? Is it structured? I've seen it. It works. It's applicable in any space. And sometimes we may say it's in a hurry, but we can do it. And then regular appreciation and acknowledgement. Appreciation is very important, but are you acknowledging it? And have you ensured you just do the whole, not really 360, but the whole 5 different ways of acknowledging and appreciating people in writing, in person, around people, because it depends on how they would want. And then finally, practice leading by example, especially when no one is watching you. Um, Let me just take a pause from there. Yeah, when no one is watching you, you might feel that I'm in the right direction. I don't need to say anything. But most of the time, when you think about how leadership works, it's how you show up when no one is there. And that to me becomes the most important thing. Okay. So I would want to end there. I just want to show a small snapshot of what we covered last time as we were finishing, just to bring people a little bit closer to what we were covering. But one of the things I would say is we need to appreciate some of these spaces that are being created with Jay and team. Without that, sometimes people might miss great opportunities. So last time we looked at different leadership levels, and I was trying to explain this because I was trying to encourage people to know where you are is okay. You don't have to almost be at the pinnacle. You start from where you are. If you are at a position leadership or at a permission level, it's still very okay. And I won't delve into this because ideally the goal is to say that it depends on how you're leading and it's in different environments. So you don't have to get worried that I am not a leader at work. How is everything I've learned going to be applicable? You almost want to have clarity that there are different levels of leadership. And even if at work you're at this level, it doesn't mean you're in the highest level as would be expected. So you want to sit back and tell yourself, I'm a work in progress. Okay. You might be at the level of production. People follow you because of what you have achieved. Model results through collaboration. Celebrate teams' wins publicly. And it might be the greatest thing you do because of what you've achieved. You have replicated more people way better than you, but they needed to meet you in order to have that impact. And therefore, you may not have the great position, but you may be so great in a certain space that has a bigger impact. Remember the comment we started with, it's more about impact. And then again, we've already talked about humanity. So again, we're trying to focus and remind people we're trying to move from being a control leave kind of leader, but more of being empowered. And therefore, how do you get yourself into that space? What are the things you need to start doing and stopping in order for you to bring the balance that needs to be seen? And then finally, we did a very simple activity, which I'll just share as I close. It was about what kind of behavior would you like to stop? So, you know, the ones we were talking about, the build and what, when you do your own personal research, you're like, there are things I need to stop doing. And as I said, they're all for you. So stop, start, and continue. What is that? Because it's only for you. And it's not a matter of just waking up and saying this and that. And finally, I would finish with this quote that leadership is not about advancing yourself, it is about advancing others. I just want to say thank you again, Sheila, for the opportunity. Anyone who wants to give me feedback of how my presentation was, I appreciate. Yes, and over to you, Sheila. It has been a great experience. The other thing I would say, feeling this is a safe space. You know, these things you have to ask before you talk. I have been teaching myself to slow down when I'm talking because one of the feedbacks I got in a 360 is ninakimbianga sana. So I am learning to explain myself in a more guided way. Thank you, Sheila, again, and thank you, Jay, for the opportunity.
Wow, thank you so much, Dorcas. I think before, is there any question? Any question? You can feel free to open your mic or drop it in the comment section. Perry saying, or even a comment. Perry saying, great, very informative session. Thank you so much, Dorcas. Thank you so much, Paris. Viviana, thank you so much. Nice presentation, Madam Dorcas. How can we get the notes or slides?
Can I answer that one? So I rarely give my slides because I get paid to talk, but because this is a recorded session, you'll be able to get because I was not rushing, you'll be able to just see it through. If you notice that there were more of talking points, yes, but I will share some recommendations right now of some great books to read about leadership. Thank you.
Yes. So I hope that's answered. Thank you, Diana, Ruth, Malema. Thank you so much. Wow, the love. So thank you so much, Dorcas. We appreciate a lot. I know there's something, one or two things we have picked and will be able to apply in our lives and also as we carry out our tasks and work. So thank you so much, Dorcas, again. So don't know if Alvin is here. If there's no question, Alvin can close us off with a word of prayer. But before that, I know this is the last session of the year. So the next time we're meeting is probably in 2026. So at this point, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And for the guys who who had been nominated for the awards. Congratulations, and yeah, we are happy for you. So I don't know if Alvin is on the call. Yes, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I know it's early, still early, but yeah, okay. If Alvin is not
Okay.
in, maybe
Yeah,
okay.
I'm here. Okay, thank you, Sheila, for for a good session. Also, thank you, Dorcas, for the powerful message. And we are always learning from you, and we are so grateful that you are always there to deliver the message, and it has been powerful, and we can't wait to hear more from you always. So let me just close with a word of prayer. Let's believe as I pray. Almighty Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the gift of life. We have had a wonderful session. We started with you, we have finished with you. We say thank you. God, we pray that you may help us have a good night. Help us have a blessed night. May you bless every soul that has managed to join the session this evening. For the speaker, we pray that you may bless her and give her more wisdom. And as for JCVs, as a family, we pray that you may bless us and help us be able to continue holding such sessions to help professionals grow. And I pray for everyone to have a good night and for our loved ones to be safe and all right. And for every day, God to keep on pouring blessings in our lives. It is in Jesus' name I do pray, trusting and believing. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining. Have a lovely night.
Thank you.